Hi friends, welcome back to Angular unit testing series. In this series, I'm talking about unit testing in Angular using Jasmine framework. In the last video, I have explained about how we can test asynchronous operations. In this video, I'm going to explain how we can test promises and observables. First, let's try to test a promise. Let me create a new spec in which let me create a counter variable which is initially 0. And then let me create a promise which resolves immediately. Inside the then block, let me increment the counter. And after this promise, let me expect this to be 1. Okay, but our test is failing because promise is going to be an asynchronous operation. And so when this expect code is executed, this code is still waiting in the queue. That is why it is failing. So we can use fake async here. Let me wrap this inside fake async. And I can use flush to execute all the asynchronous operations before running this expect code, like this. And so we can see our test is passing. Okay, let me introduce a couple of setTimeout blocks. Inside the first block, after 2 seconds, I'm adding 2 to the counter. And in the next block, after 3 seconds, I'm adding 3 to the counter. And so now I can expect the counter to be 6. And it is 6. So our test is passing. Okay, now I wanted to test whether after 2 seconds the counter is 2. And so let me add a tick and expect counter to be 2. But our test is failing. We are expecting 2, but it is coming as 3. The reason is, even though both setTimeout and promise are asynchronous operations, promise code always execute before setTimeout. Let me put console logs and show you the order of execution. We can see promise is executing first before setTimeouts. Even if this timeout is 0, it won't change. Always promise executes first before setTimeout. Because promise is a microtask. setTimeout is a task, or we can say a macro task. We know JavaScript moves the asynchronous task into a task queue, and it will execute these tasks once after the main queue is cleared. But actually, JavaScript moves all micro tasks like promise into a separate queue, and rest of the tasks in a separate queue. Once after the main queue is cleared, all the micro tasks will be executed, and after the micro task queue is cleared, it starts with the task queue. That is why we are seeing promise is executed first before the setTimeouts. And so we have to expect 1 plus 2, 3 here. Let me add another tick and test this setTimeout code as well. Okay, it is passing. And I would like to test whether the counter variable is 1 after the promise is executed. How can I test that? I cannot use a tick here and expect this to be 1. This will fail because by this time it is going to be 3 seconds, and so this is going to be 6. But we have another approach. We have seen flush will execute all the asynchronous operations. Similarly, we have another utility function called flushMicrotasks that will execute only the microtask. And so instead of using tick here, I can use flushMicrotask here to flush the microtask. And expect counter to be 1. Now our test is passing. Okay, let's try to test an observable. Let me create a new spec. Inside that, let me create a variable called isSubscribed, which is initially false. Then let me create an observable using the RxJS off operator. And let me subscribe to that observable. And inside that, let me change the isSubscribed variable to true. And then let me expect that to be true. We can see our test is passing because this is a synchronous observable. And so we don't need to have fake async utility. But now let me introduce a delay to change this to an asynchronous observable. Now we can see our test is failing. So this can be solved using the fake async utility. Delay is internally using setTimeout, and so we can use the same approach as testing a setTimeout. So I'm going to use a tick to advance the clock to 1 second. Now our test is passing again. Hope you understood. That's all for today. Please like this video and support me. I'll be back with next concept soon. Thank you. Bye.